You declined to go to the concert, not because you couldn't technically afford it. You could have figured out the $200, but you'd been putting extra money toward your emergency fund that month, and you'd made a commitment to yourself that you were going to stick with it. So you said no, and then someone asked why. And instead of just saying, "I'm not going," you heard yourself say, "I just don't really have the money right now." Which wasn't quite true, but it was easier than the real explanation, which was that you were prioritizing something they probably wouldn't understand, or would have opinions about, or would try to talk you out of. Most people have had some version of this conversation: the fake excuse to avoid explaining a real financial decision, the apologetic tone when declining something social, the sense that your actual financial choices, the deliberate ones, the ones you've thought about, the ones that align with something you're building, need to be justified or softened or translated into terms other people will find acceptable. And here's what I want to explore today. The day you stop doing that, the day you stop explaining, justifying, or apologizing for your financial decisions to people who aren't your financial partner. Because something changes when that stops, not just in how you manage your money, but in how much energy you have to actually do it. My name is Nick, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, financial psychology, and the invisible forces that shape financial behavior in ways we rarely examine directly. This one is about a force that almost nobody talks about: the social pressure to justify your financial choices to your peers and what it costs you. Subscribe if this resonates, and let's get into it. Let me start with why this pressure exists at all. Money is deeply social. For most of human history, in communities where people lived closely together, your financial behavior was visible to and relevant to the people around you. How you spent, what you contributed, what you kept, these things had direct social implications. The social monitoring of financial behavior wasn't just nosiness, it was a mechanism for maintaining community norms around sharing, fairness, and reciprocity. We've inherited those instincts, applied to a world where the community context has changed entirely. Your financial choices almost never directly affect your friends in the way that mattered when we lived in small tribes. But the social instinct, the feeling that your financial behavior needs to be legible and acceptable to the people around you, is still fully operational. This is why people feel compelled to explain when they say no to things, not because an explanation is required, but because declining to participate in something social carries an implicit suggestion that you're different from the group, and different from the group requires justification. The justification that usually works, "I can't afford it," is socially acceptable because it frames your absence as circumstance rather than choice. It lets the group absorb your absence without it feeling like a statement about their choices. But "I can't afford it" when you technically can is a lie, and "I'm saving aggressively right now and this doesn't fit my plan" is the truth. But it's a truth that often generates exactly the kind of response you were trying to avoid. The questions, the advice, the "you're still young, you should enjoy life." The vague implication that there's something slightly joyless or uptight about having a deliberate financial plan. So people hide the truth behind the acceptable fiction, over and over, in small ways, on small occasions, until the habit of concealing and softening their financial choices becomes so automatic they don't even notice they're doing it. Let me talk about what this actually costs, because I think the cost is real, and most people have never totaled it up. The first cost is decisions made by social approval rather than financial alignment. When you're in the habit of explaining and justifying your financial choices to others, you start to feel, even unconsciously, that choices you'd have to explain a lot are choices you shouldn't make. And choices that are socially easy to go along with start feeling financially acceptable even when they're not. The social ease of a decision becomes a proxy for its financial soundness, and social ease is an almost completely unreliable proxy for financial soundness. The second cost is energy, specifically the ongoing mental and emotional effort of managing the gap between your actual financial choices and the version of those choices you're presenting to the people around you. Every fake excuse requires a small cognitive cost. Every apologetic justification requires emotional effort. Every time you go along with something you didn't actually want to do financially, to avoid the conversation about why you wouldn't, you've spent energy and money on something that didn't serve your goals. Individually, these costs are small. Collectively, over months and years of social financial conformity, they add up to a significant drain on both your money and your mental bandwidth. The third cost is the most important one. The person you become financially when you're optimizing for social legibility rather than actual alignment. When your financial choices are primarily shaped by what you'll be able to explain comfortably to others, you end up with a financial life that looks normal, that tracks with the peer group, but that may not be building toward anything you actually want. You're not making financial decisions, you're making social decisions that happen to involve money. Now let's talk about what changes when you stop. The first thing that changes is that you get to stop lying. The small dishonesty of "I can't afford it" when you've made a deliberate choice is genuinely corrosive over time. It frames your intentional decisions as limitations, which quietly teaches your own brain that you're constrained rather than choosing. When you replace that framing with either the truth or a simple, "that doesn't work for me right now," you start relating to your own financial choices as choices, things you're actively making, not things happening to you. The second thing that changes is that you stop outsourcing the approval process for your financial decisions to people who don't share your goals. This sounds obvious when stated directly. Why would you need approval from someone who doesn't know your financial situation, doesn't share your goals, and won't be there when the bill comes? And yet, implicitly, that's exactly what's happening when you're crafting explanations designed to land well with your social group. You're asking them to approve your choice, which means their approval is part of how you evaluate the choice. When you stop doing this, when your financial decisions stop needing to pass a social legibility test, you can start making them purely on the basis of whether they align with what you're actually building. That's a completely different decision process, and it produces completely different outcomes over time. The third thing that changes is your relationship to financial difference. Here's something worth saying directly. The further your financial choices diverge from the norm in your social group, the more seriously you're saving, the more deliberately you're investing, the more intentionally you're building something, the harder social legibility becomes. The choices that produce the biggest long-term financial outcomes are frequently the ones that look the most unusual in the short term. If you need every financial choice to be easily explainable to the people around you, you will systematically avoid the choices that are hardest to explain, which are often the most financially significant ones. When you stop needing to explain, you can make those choices without friction. Let me walk you through how this looked for someone specific. Let's call him Tom. Tom is 29. For the first 5 or 6 years of his working life, he was a consistent explainer. He explained why he wasn't going to the expensive concert. He explained why he was packing lunch instead of going out with the group. He explained his Roth IRA to people who immediately glazed over and changed the subject. He explained, apologetically, his decision to drive the older car instead of leasing something new. Most of the explanations weren't received well. They generated advice he didn't ask for, skepticism about whether he was being too restrictive, and occasional gentle mockery about being cheap. So gradually he stopped explaining and started deflecting. "Yeah, I'll see," instead of declining. "I'm kind of broke this week," instead of "I'm saving for something." Going along with things he didn't want to do financially to avoid the conversation. Then one day, he doesn't remember exactly when it shifted, Tom just stopped. He declined the expensive dinner by saying, "That doesn't really work for me." No elaboration. He didn't explain his savings rate at the barbecue when it came up. He said, "I'm working on some financial stuff," and left it there. He stopped bringing up his investing at all with the people who responded to it with boredom or skepticism. What he found, and he told me this surprised him, was that people largely just accepted it. The thing he'd spent years dreading, the pushback, the interrogation, the social cost of being different, mostly just didn't materialize. Some people were mildly curious. Nobody actually made it a big deal. And internally, the change was significant. He stopped spending the energy managing the gap between his real choices and his presented ones. He stopped making financial decisions partly on the basis of how he'd explain them, and his savings rate, which had been stuck in a zone he knew was lower than he wanted, started climbing, because he was no longer subsidizing social conformity with money he should have been redirecting. Practically, what does it look like to stop explaining? The first thing is recognizing that a full explanation is almost never required. "That doesn't really work for me" is a complete sentence, so is "I'm going to sit this one out." You don't owe anyone a breakdown of your savings rate or your investment thesis or your reasoning about lifestyle trade-offs. The second thing is noticing who in your life makes your financial choices harder versus easier. Some people, your actual financial partner, maybe a close friend or mentor who shares your values around money, are worth talking to honestly about financial decisions because they can add something. Most people on most occasions cannot add anything useful to your financial decision making. They're not bad people. They just don't share your goals, don't know your situation, and aren't going to be there for the outcomes. Their approval doesn't need to be part of the process. The third thing is sitting with the brief discomfort of a simple no or that doesn't work without immediately filling the silence with an explanation. The impulse to explain is automatic. It takes practice to notice it and let it pass without acting on it. Here's what I want to leave you with. Every time you craft an explanation for a financial choice specifically designed to be socially acceptable, you're spending cognitive and emotional energy on approval from people who won't be there for the outcomes of that choice. That energy, and sometimes real money, goes somewhere, and it's not going toward the thing you're building. The day you stop needing that approval is the day your financial decisions become fully yours. Not in the sense that they have to be private or that you stop talking about money altogether, but in the sense that the decisions are being made by your own goals, your own values, your own long game, not by what's easiest to explain to someone who's going to forget about it by Tuesday. Drop a comment. Do you currently explain your financial choices more than you want to? And has there been a moment where you just stopped? Thanks for watching.